The locker room was quiet, with only the soft hum of the fluorescent lights breaking the silence. Most of the team had left for the day, their laughter and chatter echoing faintly in the hallways, fading as the last of them headed home. I'd lingered, needing a moment to unwind after practice, my muscles aching and mind elsewhere. I wasn't expecting anyone else to be here, let alone him. As I peeled off my jersey, I heard a soft creak, the unmistakable sound of the locker room door swinging open. I turned and found myself face to face with Eric. He was standing just inside the doorway, his gaze meeting mine with a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. We'd been friends for years, since middle school, and had spent countless hours together on the field, in study sessions and during endless summer nights. "Thought you'd left," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, though something about his presence felt different. He just shrugged, closing the door behind him. "Nah," he replied, flashing me that familiar half-smile. "Needed a few more reps in the gym, I guess." There was a pause, a beat longer than necessary, and I found myself oddly aware of the silence. He moved to his locker, just a few down from mine, and began to change out of his workout clothes, his movements unhurried. I tried to look away, focusing on the laces of my sneakers, but my gaze kept drifting back to him, catching on the easy confidence in the way he carried himself, the subtle play of muscle beneath his shirt. "You okay?" he asked suddenly, breaking my thoughts. "Yeah, just tired, I guess," I replied, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Eric looked over at me, his expression softened with a familiarity that was both comforting and unsettling. "Long practice, huh?" I nodded, unsure of what else to say. The silence settled back over us, thicker now, charged with an undercurrent I didn't fully understand. I felt the weight of his gaze on me as I stood there, pretending to be busy with my gear. I knew I should say something, make a joke, anything to break the tension, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, Eric moved closer, his hand brushing against mine as he reached for something on the bench. The touch was brief, innocent even, but it sent a jolt through me, my pulse quickening. I glanced up, and our eyes met, a moment of quiet understanding passing between us, something unspoken yet unmistakable. I could feel my heart pounding, the air between us thick with something I couldn't name. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. It was as if we were both waiting, caught in a moment that stretched on forever, neither of us daring to break it. He leaned in slightly, close enough that I could feel his breath on my skin, his gaze intense, searching. "You sure you're okay?" he murmured, his voice low, barely more than a whisper. I nodded, unable to look away. "Yeah, I don't know." There was a vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen before, something raw and honest. His hand lingered near mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin, and for a moment I forgot where we were, forgot everything except the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his eyes held mine. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers brushing against his, a quiet reassurance, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to reassure, him or myself. His hand closed around mine, his grip firm yet gentle, grounding me in the moment, and I felt something shift between us, something I couldn't ignore. I swallowed, the weight of my emotions catching up with me, the realization of what this could mean. "Eric," I began, my voice barely audible, but he shook his head, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a quiet, comforting gesture. "We don't have to say anything," he murmured, his voice steady. "Not if you're not ready." I nodded, grateful for the understanding, the patience in his gaze. We stayed like that for a moment, caught in the quiet intimacy of the locker room, our hands still intertwined, neither of us willing to let go. The silence between us was both comforting and electrifying, each second stretching out into what felt like minutes. There was an intensity in Eric's gaze that seemed to reach past the surface, as if he saw right through me, understood everything I hadn't been able to say. And yet, There was no judgment, only quiet acceptance, a soft invitation to let down my guard, to simply be. I don't know how long we stood there, our hands locked in that small, grounding touch, but eventually the reality of where we were crept in. The locker room wasn't exactly the place for whatever this was, whatever was unfolding between us. Still, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Eric must have sensed my hesitation because he released my hand slowly, his gaze not leaving mine. "We could grab something to eat, maybe?" he offered, his voice carefully casual, though I could hear the slight tremor in his tone. "Yeah, that'd be good," I replied, feeling a rush of relief mixed with anticipation. There was something unspoken in the invitation, a promise that this conversation... We packed up our things in silence, waiting for our shared glance later. We left the locker room side by side, the quiet intimacy of the space following the sound of the crisp evening air. The walk walked out of it was quiet. There were moments when our shoulders brushed, brief comments, reminded of the connection we acknowledged but hadn't We settled into a booth near the back, away from prying eyes, and ordered our usual burgers and fries, a ritual as familiar as breathing. It should have felt like any other night, just two friends grabbing a meal after practice, but everything felt heightened, charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. Eric was quiet, his gaze occasionally flickering to mine, and I could see the same mix of emotions reflected in his eyes: curiosity, uncertainty, and a flicker of something deeper. When our food arrived, he took a bite, then put his burger down, leaning forward slightly, his expression serious. "Look, I don't want to make things weird between us," he began, his voice soft, careful. "But tonight, in the locker room..." He trailed off, searching for the right words, and I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of his gaze grounding me. "I know," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't nothing." He nodded, relief softening the tension in his expression. "Exactly. I don't know what it was, but it felt real." There it was, the acknowledgement I hadn't dared to voice, the confirmation that what I'd felt wasn't one-sided. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, a truth that had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. "So, what do we do?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. He considered this for a moment, his gaze distant. "Maybe we just take it slow, see where it goes." "Yeah," I agreed, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. One step at a time. Our conversation shifted back to familiar topics, the comfort of our routine settling in, but the undercurrent of that shared moment lingered. Every now and then, our gazes would meet, a silent reminder of what we'd acknowledged, the unspoken promise of something more. And as we left the diner, the night stretching out ahead of us, I knew that whatever this was, whatever we were beginning, it was something I was ready to explore. The walk back to the car was quiet, our footsteps echoing in the empty streets. As we reached my car, Eric hesitated, his hand lingering on the door handle, his gaze flickering to mine. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good night," he murmured, his voice soft. "Good night," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me as I watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the shadows. The night felt different, the air tinged with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. And as I drove home, my thoughts drifting back to that quiet moment in the locker room, I knew that this was only the beginning. Over the next few days, the tension between us grew, subtle but unmistakable. Practices, which had once been effortless, felt charged now, each accidental brush of our hands, each shared glance, loaded with the memory of that night. It was as if we were both trying to navigate an invisible line, cautious not to overstep, but equally unwilling to retreat. Eric was quieter than usual, his glances lingering a moment too long, his words softer, more thoughtful. And though we didn't speak of it directly, I could feel that something between us had shifted, that we were both aware of a current pulling us together, one we were powerless to ignore. One evening, after a grueling practice, the locker room was emptying out as usual. Most of the team had left, their voices and laughter fading into the hallway, but Eric and I lingered, caught up in some conversation about a play we were working on. When the last of the guys left, we fell into a silence that felt both familiar and charged, a quiet acknowledgement of the privacy we now had. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts, when suddenly he stepped closer, his presence solid and grounding. "You want to hang out after this?" he asked, his voice low and hesitant. There was a softness in his gaze, an invitation I felt all too eager to accept. "Yeah, sure," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my pulse quickened at the prospect. We changed in silence, the small space between us filled with an almost palpable tension. I could feel his gaze on me as I pulled on my shirt, the warmth of his presence grounding me. Every movement, every glance felt like a test, a silent exploration of the boundaries we had left unspoken. When I closed my locker and turned to face him, he was watching me, his expression unreadable. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, a flicker of uncertainty that made my chest tighten. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, following him out of the locker room, our footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. We walked in silence, side by side, the air between us charged with the weight of unspoken words, unacknowledged feelings. It was as if the world outside had faded, leaving just the two of us, caught in a moment we weren't sure how to navigate. We reached his car, and he paused, his hand resting on the door handle. For a moment I thought he might say something, but instead he unlocked the car and gestured for me to get in. The drive was quiet, the city lights blurring past as we headed toward the edge of town, to a spot we used to frequent in high school, a small overlook that offered a perfect view of the city lights. The familiar sight brought a sense of comfort, a reminder of simpler times, but tonight it felt different. The silence between us grew heavier, the tension palpable as we sat there, the city lights twinkling below us. Finally, Eric broke the silence. "I keep thinking about that night, in the locker room." His voice was soft, his gaze focused on the city lights as if he couldn't bear to look at me. It felt like something shifted. My heart raced, his words both a confirmation and a revelation. "Yeah," I murmured, my voice steady but my hands trembling slightly. It felt like more than just a moment. He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know what to do with this, with us, but I can't ignore it anymore." His words hung between us, heavy and vulnerable, and I felt my pulse quicken, the reality of his confession sinking in. Without thinking, I reached out, my hand brushing against his. His touch warm, round. We sat on the back, our hands locked in a small, simple connection. Neither of us speaking, but in the silence, his gaze intense, his voice a whisper. "Are we really doing this?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "If you want to, his breath warm against my skin, his hand tightening around mine. And as his lips met mine, I felt a wave of warmth flood through me, a quiet confirmation that this, whatever this was real. The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, as if we were both afraid to cross that line, but it quickly deepened, the tension and longing spilling over in a way that felt both inevitable and electrifying. His hands found their way to my shoulders, pulling me closer, grounding me in the moment, and I felt myself melt into his touch, every part of me aching for more. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing heavily, I looked into his eyes, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. There was no going back now, no pretending that this hadn't happened. We had crossed a line, one we couldn't uncross, and as I looked into his eyes, I saw the same realization mirrored there. We sat there, letting the weight of what had just happened settle between us. Neither of us said a word, but the silence was filled with a quiet understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of everything that had brought us to this moment. Eric was the first to break the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to ignore this for so long," he admitted, his gaze flickering between my eyes and our intertwined hands. "I kept telling myself it was just something I'd get over, but being around you, it doesn't go away." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of relief and vulnerability in his words. "I know, I tried too. I thought it was just me." The confession felt like a weight lifting off my chest, a truth I'd held in for far too long. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, I wasn't alone in this. He looked down, his thumb brushing softly over my knuckles, a small, grounding gesture that sent a thrill through me. "It wasn't just you, not by a long shot." He looked back up, his gaze intense, and I could see the same fear and hope in his eyes that I felt. "Then what do we do?" I asked, my voice soft, filled with both anticipation and uncertainty. He took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, his expression thoughtful. Maybe we just let things happen. No expectations, no plans. Just us." His words were simple, but they felt like a promise, a commitment to something we couldn't fully understand yet. I nodded, feeling a surge of warmth in my chest, a quiet contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yeah," I agreed, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Just us." We stayed there, wrapped in the comfort of each other's presence, our hands still intertwined as the city lights twinkled below us. There was no need for words, no need to define what we had. It was enough just to be here, to share this moment. As the night wore on, we found ourselves drawn closer, the boundaries between us blurring. He leaned in, his hand sliding up to my shoulder, his touch firm yet gentle, and I felt my breath catch as he closed the distance between us again. This kiss was deeper, more assured, a quiet confirmation of everything we'd left unsaid. Our world narrowed to just the two of us, the soft sounds of our breathing, the warmth of his hands on my skin, grounding me in the moment. It was intense, overwhelming, but there was a gentleness in the way he held me, a quiet understanding that this was something we both wanted, something we were ready to embrace. When we finally pulled back, the night was quiet, the weight of our shared experience settling around us. I could see the same mixture of emotions in his gaze, relief, uncertainty, and a hint of something deeper, something that made my heart race. He reached up, his thumb brushing gently over my cheek, his touch soft yet grounding. "I don't know what this means," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "but I don't want it to stop." "Neither do I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. And in that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. The drive back was quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of mutual understanding. When we finally parted ways, there was no need for words. The unspoken promise between us was enough. But as I lay in bed that night, my mind replaying every moment, every touch, I felt a flicker of doubt, a small voice in the back of my mind whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. What would this mean for us? Could we really navigate this new territory without risking everything we'd built? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the warmth that lingered, the quiet assurance of his presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them together. The next day at practice, everything felt different. The usual routine, the drills, the coach's instructions, the camaraderie of the team, All had a new layer of tension, subtle but undeniable. Eric and I exchanged glances, each one loaded with the memory of the night before, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in our relationship. When we were in the locker room, our teammates around us, we kept a careful distance, falling into our usual routines with a practiced ease. But every now and then I'd catch his gaze lingering on me, a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. It was a challenge to focus, to keep up the facade of normalcy, while a storm of emotions brewed just beneath the surface. After practice, as the team filtered out one by one, I lingered, waiting for him, the weight of anticipation settling in my chest. When the locker room finally emptied, Eric walked over, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Do you want to grab dinner again?" he asked, his voice low, a tentative smile playing on his lips. I could tell he was testing the waters, gauging where we stood, but there was a warmth in his gaze that reassured me. "Yeah, I'd like that," I replied, my heart lifting. This time, we went to a small cafe tucked away in a quiet part of town, a place we knew would be discreet. We sat in a corner booth, the soft hum of background music filling the silence as we settled into an easy conversation. It felt almost normal, two friends sharing a meal, but there was a new depth to our exchanges, a quiet intimacy that neither of us tried to hide. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned more serious, and I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone: fears, dreams, moments of doubt. Eric listened, his gaze never leaving mine, his presence a steadying force. He opened up, too, sharing pieces of himself that he usually kept hidden, and I felt a surge of gratitude, of connection, that ran deeper than words. When we left the cafe, the streets were quiet, the sky darkening as evening settled in. We walked in comfortable silence, our hands brushing occasionally, each touch sending a jolt of warmth through me. As we reached the car, he turned to face me, his expression soft but serious. "I don't know where this is going," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to stop. I've never felt this way before, and I'm scared, but I want to see where this leads." The vulnerability in his voice, the quiet honesty, made my chest tighten, and I reached out, my hand resting on his shoulder. "Me too," I replied, my voice steady. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, and I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. In that moment, everything felt right, the doubts and uncertainties fading in the light of his gaze. We leaned in, our foreheads touching, and I closed my eyes, savoring the quiet intimacy of the moment. There was no need for words. Everything we needed to say was there, in the quiet connection we shared. After a few moments, he pulled back, his gaze soft. "Let's go back to my place," he murmured, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. I nodded, my heart pounding, and together we walked to the car, the unspoken promise between us filling the silence. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, the anticipation building with each passing mile. When we reached his apartment, he led me inside, his hand brushing against mine, a grounding touch that sent a thrill through me. We stood there in the dim light, the weight of the moment settling over us, and slowly he reached for me, his touch gentle, a silent invitation I was all too eager to accept. Our movements were careful, deliberate, each touch, each glance filled with a quiet intensity. The world outside faded, leaving just the two of us, lost in the warmth of each other's presence. It was slow, unhurried, a dance of connection and vulnerability, each moment deepening the bond we'd discovered. As the night wore on, we lay together, wrapped in the quiet comfort of each other's arms, the weight of the day melting away. There were no words, no need to define what we had. It was enough just to be here, to share this moment. But as the first light of dawn crept through the window, reality began to seep back in, bringing with it a new set of questions. I could feel the weight of them settling over us, an unspoken tension that neither of us wanted to confront. Eric was the first to speak, his voice soft. "What happens now?" I swallowed, my mind racing with possibilities, fears, and hopes. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "But I don't regret any of this." He nodded, his gaze filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "Me neither." We sat in silence, letting the weight of everything settle, the questions and doubts hanging between us like shadows. But as I looked at him, his expression soft and vulnerable, I knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. The days that followed felt like navigating a tightrope. Eric and I fell into a rhythm, finding moments alone between practices, sharing quiet conversations that felt as essential as breathing. The secrecy added a thrill but also a tension, an undercurrent of worry about who might notice, what they might say. Yet, every time we locked eyes, every time his hand brushed mine, it reassured me that this was worth it, that he was worth it. We'd grown more careful, more aware of our surroundings. Every glance, every touch was measured, deliberate. But even with the precautions, it was impossible to hide the way we'd changed. The team noticed, joking that we'd become closer than ever, throwing around easy banter about our inseparable bromance. I laughed it off, but deep down it twisted something in me. A reminder of how fragile this was, how easily it could all come undone. One evening, after a particularly exhausting practice, as the locker room emptied out, Eric and I lingered, as we often did. We exchanged a glance, a quiet understanding passing between us, and when the last teammate left, I moved toward him, the tension in the air thick and electric. But just as I reached for his hand, the door swung open, and one of our teammates walked back in, startling us both. "Oh, hey, didn't know anyone was still here," he said, oblivious, grabbing something he'd left behind. Eric and I stepped back quickly, our expressions carefully neutral, but my heart was pounding, the close call leaving a lingering fear in its wake. As our teammate left, I could feel Eric tense beside me, his gaze distant, his jaw tight. "We need to be more careful," he murmured, his voice low, and I nodded, swallowing hard. The fear was real, a shadow that grew with each passing day, but so was the pull between us. It was undeniable, something we both knew we couldn't ignore. Yet, the weight of secrecy, the constant vigilance, it was wearing on us, and I could see it in his eyes, the conflict growing with every touch, every shared moment. One evening, after a long, silent drive back to his place, Eric parked the car, and we sat in the dark, the tension thick. He looked over at me, his expression conflicted, his fingers drumming anxiously on the steering wheel. "Maybe we should take a step back," he said quietly, the words heavy with reluctance. "Just until... I don't know, until it feels safer." The words hit me like a punch, and I felt a pang of disappointment, but I understood. The fear, the worry, it was there for both of us, and as much as I wanted to ignore it, I knew he was right. Nodding, I looked down, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea." But the emptiness that followed was palpable, a hollow ache that settled in my chest as I realized just how much he'd come to mean to me. We parted ways that night, an unspoken agreement to keep our distance, but it left a gaping void that I couldn't ignore. Days turned into weeks, the distance between us growing, and I felt the loss like a wound that wouldn't heal. Practices became routine, our interactions limited to casual exchanges, and though we kept up appearances, the absence of his touch, his gaze, was a constant reminder of what we'd sacrificed. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself driving, aimless, my thoughts consumed by the memories of those quiet moments, the warmth of his hand in mine, the comfort of his presence. Before I realized it, I was parked outside his place, my heart racing, unsure of what I was even doing there. But as I sat there contemplating whether to leave, the door opened, and there he was, standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something I recognized immediately. Without a word, he stepped out, crossing the distance between us, his gaze intense, and before I knew it, he was pulling me into a tight embrace, the weight of our separation vanishing in an instant. "God, I missed you," he murmured, his voice raw, and I felt a surge of relief, of certainty, wash over me. We didn't need words. The connection between us was enough, grounding us in a way that felt both familiar and exhilarating. In that quiet, vulnerable moment, we let go of the fear, the secrecy, the worry, and simply held each other, lost in the warmth of our shared presence. After a long silence, he pulled back slightly, his gaze steady, filled with a quiet determination. "I don't want to do this without you. I don't care what people think or what we might risk. It's worth it." The words were a balm to every doubt, every fear I'd held on to, and I nodded, my heart swelling with a mixture of relief and joy. "Me too, whatever it takes. I'm here." We spent that night together, talking, sharing dreams and fears, our connection deepening with each passing hour. And as dawn broke, casting a warm light over us, I knew that this was where I belonged, by his side, facing whatever came next, together.